What is going on, snooker fans? Welcome back to the channel now. As always, a Monday is normally for reviewing a tournament that happened the week prior, but apart from the Championship League, there was no action. But it is the Championship League that has created this video for me this week. And as I'm recording this, World Snooker have just published their own article of a very similar nature. I promise I'm not stealing from this article to make this video. I did intend to make it before that came out, but that is Judd Trump and his pursuit of 100 centuries in a season. He would of course be the only player to do that twice, following Neil Robertson, who also made it back in 2013, 2014. And Judd, he's steadily been making centuries all season. He was around sort of the low 50s at the halfway point, which is slightly under where you need to be. And I was slightly surprised, in truth, to see him at the Championship League last week, because he's been talking a lot this season about not wanting to play in everything and sort of pacing himself to make sure that he's not burnt out by the season end. However, then you look at the statistics and the way that he was scoring centuries for fun last week, and it makes complete sense. He made 16 centuries last week across two groups, which brings his total centuries of the season up to 65. And of course, this season is the first season that World Snooker introduced a bonus for the player that could make 100 centuries in a season. So if Judd Trump does go on to achieve that feat, he will receive £100,000. So the incentive was clearly there for him. And making his appearance at the Championship League in that regard makes complete sense. I remember going back some 10 years ago now to when Neil Robertson made it. I think he made 22 centuries at the Championship League alone when he made 103 centuries in a season. So, 1/5 of his centuries in that season came from this tournament, and that's kind of the level that Judd Trump might be making as well here. And with all due respect to the Championship League, it's not a tournament I hold in any regard whatsoever. It's a glorified practice session as far as I'm concerned, and the rate that players score centuries in it just proves that point for me. I mean, Jack Jones, who, let's face it, isn't exactly the highest scorer on tour, he's made 32 centuries across all of the Championship League groups so far, the most centuries a player has ever made in a single tournament. And, that's the kind of numbers that a player wouldn't get in a whole season, let alone a single tournament. But take nothing away from Judd Trump's decision here. It's clearly tactical. He's won the Championship League, I believe, the record amount of times. It's not exactly prestigious, but what it does do, particularly this season, is it boosts his chances of making that 100 centuries. And like I say, he's on 65. He goes into the winners group, I think, next month. So he's got a chance there to make even more. And it's going to be interesting to see whether the 100 centuries perhaps plays in his mind. He may have a goal in mind already of what tournaments he wants to play in and what tournaments he wants to skip in order to prepare for the World Championship. But if he's also building towards a century of centuries, he may need to reevaluate what tournaments he wants to play in. But the good news for him is, the World Championship, the amount of frames that you play, and the fact that Judd Trump just seems to get to quarterfinals minimum means that he's going to be probably playing a lot of frames in Sheffield. So that's a lot of chances to make centuries. And then you've also got the Tour Championship, which he's guaranteed to be in the week or sort of 2 weeks before Sheffield as well. And that's multi-session matches all the way from the get-go. So again, there, even more chances to make centuries. And I think as long as he's in the 90s coming into Sheffield, he's got a really, really good chance. When Judd made his century of centuries a few years ago, I think he came to Sheffield on 98. When Neil came to Sheffield, he was on 93. As long as you're in the 90s and as long as you win a couple of matches, you're going to have plenty of chances to make that record. And 35 left to go. He's going to be playing in, I would suggest, at least another 5 or 6 tournaments. It's not nailed on. When he made his first century of centuries, it was nailed on right from the get-go that he was going to make it. And actually, making 102 was significantly less than I think we all thought it would be around about this time of that season. It was only, he slowed down, and obviously COVID happened, which didn't help. But it looked like he was going to obliterate that record of Neil Robertson's, but he actually ended 1 century less. It'll be interesting to see if he makes more this season. But first things first, he's got to make it. And that'll be the interesting thing. He was in a really good position last season to make a century of centuries around about this point. I remember around the UK Championship, he was over 50. He was over halfway there before he even got into the turn of the year. He slowed down significantly around this time of the year. He didn't make many at the Tour Championship. He didn't make many in Sheffield either. He'll be wanting to put that right. And I think that extra incentive of £100,000 this year will galvanise him towards making that goal. And I do think, if you had to ask me, will he make it now? I am leaning towards yes, he will. And that's that for this week's episode. Was I clutching at straws for video ideas this week? Absolutely. But it is an interesting subplot for this season, particularly with that added incentive of the prize money. The tour is in Germany this week for one of my favourite tournaments. January is a really good month for snooker, actually. The Championship League, I don't rate it at all, but it is fun to watch because every match, all the players are just playing as if they're playing one another down their club in a best of 5. There's no pressure. They're all playing just carefree snooker. Their arm is so loose that centuries just are bound to happen. Like, there were so many matches, especially there was a match between Trump and Joe O'Connor, which finished 3-2 to Judd, and all 5 frames had centuries. That's the kind of standard you get in the Championship League. It's not prestigious by any stretch, but it is fun to watch. And then, of course, you've got the Masters at the beginning of the month, and then you've got the German Masters at the end of the month, which is what we've got this week. A fantastic tournament in a world-class venue. I'm really looking forward to it. Judd Trump, again, is the defending champion. Good luck stopping him. But Sean Murphy is going to come in a lot of positive thoughts after his Masters win. And going back to 2015, I remember after Sean had won the Masters, he then went to the German Masters and beat O'Sullivan, and I think he got to the semi-finals or maybe even the final there before losing to Mark Selby. So Murphy could be on a bit of a roll, and there's other players as well to look out for. It's going to be a brilliant tournament. No O'Sullivan, he's dropped out again. But other than that, it's a pretty stacked lineup. It's going to be a fantastic tournament. And as always, I'll be back next week to review.